Hey everybody, you're kicking it with the Homeboys and the Homeboys podcast, where we talk everything in the world of real estate investing. Whether you're just getting started or a seasoned vet, we're going to give you our over 50 years of combined real estate experience. Today, we've got some awesome guests. We are talking with Megan and Braden of Empora Title, and we are super stoked to have them, aren't we, Scotty?
We're super pumped. So Empora Title, I can't wait to share with you. If you don't know a lot about title insurance, or even if you do know a lot about title insurance, you're going to want to pay attention today.
For sure.
Because not only are they going to cover the secrets and what title insurance is, but they are genuinely changing the industry, especially for real estate investors. And you will want to pay attention, because this is how title work is going to be working in the future. They're the ones taking it to where it's going to be. So we're super excited. I also want to hear their backstory, because it's pretty amazing for these young folks to come along and just say, okay, I'm going to change an entire $1 billion industry. And they have literally
billion.
Done it. 36 billion?
36 Bs.
Yeah.
Wow, isn't it incredible?
Yeah.
Well, why don't we just start off with Megan? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll talk with Braden, and we can't wait to get into this.
Yeah, for sure. And thank you so much for having us. We obviously have really enjoyed partnering with you guys and are excited to get to know everybody who's listening to the podcast. So $36 billion industry, title, is a market and an industry that most of you have probably interacted with at some point. And I'm from a small town, Ohio, here in the Midwest, and grew up. My dad's an immigrant, and built a business, here in the Midwest also, and have just always been really passionate about entrepreneurship and the ways that in America you can still build businesses and create generational wealth. So I went off to Ohio State, got my economics degree there, and found my way into technology really early in my career, and specifically worked for a software company that was selling software to title companies. So I knew nothing about title. This was 2016 when that started. Knew nothing about the process, knew nothing about the industry at that time, but really rolled up my sleeves to understand how title companies work, how limited their software systems were, and ultimately try to figure out how to make the end experience better for people. It's really rare, even in investor world, to hear somebody say, I just had an amazing title experience. Most consumers don't even remember who their title company was. They just think of them as the people who handed them the stack of papers at the end, which is a huge miss, right? Because it's the most important transaction in people's lives. It can sometimes involve a stressful experience, whether it's divorce or, whatever it might be. So really important moment, and became passionate about it while I was there. Ultimately, round two, starting Empora, decided to focus on investors because we really wanted to partner with a group that we could build our technology alongside. Investors do not want to come into title companies unless they absolutely have to. And sometimes we even joke with some of our partners where we say, I hope I don't see you unless we actually plan to meet. Because if I don't see you and we're only hanging out because we want to, that means that I'm doing my job and we're doing our job. They build really great businesses, and they've just been a really rewarding group to work with. So
I think that's really cool to hear the technology side, because Scotty and I, we're a little older. We're in our mid 40s, and whenever we were getting out of college, and I think you and I decided to get into real estate, the last thing I was ever thinking about was technology. It was, boots on the ground, getting your hands dirty, doing all that.
The listings were in a paper book, like a Yellow Pages.
Correct. So, technology doesn't really enter into our brains. We talked a little bit before coming on today. Braden, you have a pretty serious real estate background and investment, kind of similar to Scotty and I's story. As well. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your...
Yeah, so I started my career in doing turnaround work for hospitals, merger and acquisitions, performance improvement engagement, and kind of started in the corporate world. Came up, I went through consulting, doing turnarounds, went into work for a private equity fund out of Germany. We were buying companies in the United States and rolling them up. And then ultimately...
Ich spreche Deutsch.
Yeah.
Ich spreche Deutsch.
Spreche Deutsch.
He's lying. Then, he does not spreche
I speak
Deutsch.
no Deutsch. Yeah, nothing. Nine. And then from there, I was working on all bottom line improvement projects. And I was like, I wanted to go into something that was exciting, that was about growth, not about cutting back.
Right.
And that took me to the technology world. Went to an early stage venture capital backed company, and then ultimately arrived at Empora and joined the leadership team with Megan here. And one of the things that was always important to me was I wanted to learn how to run businesses, learn how to build great teams, and learn how to build something that changes the way that people work every single day. And that was always really a big driver for me. One of the things though that I constantly had in the back was, where do I put my capital? Right. So it's like, if I make X amount of money, where am I putting it? Right. And so real estate has been that avenue for me. I've had great partners who I still partner with today, and, been doing real estate in the Ohio market for 8-9 years at this point. So that's a little bit of background on what I've been doing. But ultimately what brought me to Empora was, there's this quote when I was raising venture capital at my last company, and it was from a venture capitalist in Silicon Valley. And he said, small companies don't change I always mess this up. It's big companies don't change the world. Small companies that change the world become big companies. And I think that that's just a really important tenet in how we're approaching title in this industry and the opportunity, and something that drew me here. I mean, as an investor, I've transacted with 50 title companies. So I understood the pains of what a great consumer experience looks like compared to how investors and even agencies experience transacting real estate today. And it felt like this wart that was sitting there that needed to be mended and healed and changed. And so that's really what brought me here, on top of, a great vision that Megan's built, well-funded business, and of that vision that, is going to, how do we change this industry?
Well, I think that you guys are the spearhead on a revolution that's going to happen one way or another, either way. You guys are leading the way with title, but we have the old school large brick and mortar title companies and the old school real estate brokerages across the country that are holding on to dear life for control, and they're doing it in an old fashioned manner. They do it with boots on the ground, with, we're brokers, licensed brokers ourselves, but at the same time, we don't operate in that traditional space where they're trying to hold on to the way that it was. They're trying to have control of the transactions, control of the real estate. And technology has become a tidal wave at this point, and I think it's going to be a pretty hard crash for a lot of them. And so I wanted to hear your perspective on that title side of what we see as a revolution that's happening.
Yeah, we couldn't agree more with that. And there's a good term for that in technology called the innovator's dilemma, where, people build great businesses, and then it hits a point where it's like, okay, for us to really build something game changing, we'd have to burn our current business down. And most people don't want to do that, right? And so there's a lot of the real estate supply chain that is going through that existential crisis right now outside of title. Within title specifically, it's interesting. We started our company right in the middle of the pandemic, and a really interesting tailwind that led to that timing was many of the states were passing legislation for RONs, for remote online notarizations. And previously there were only 7 states that allowed for it. So there's been a really interesting tailwind in the US the past, 4 to 6 years to help digitize the process. And most title company owner operators don't have the tools or the background to really think strategically about, what a better technology stack could look like to enable growth and scale, not just for themselves, but also just a better experience overall. So, title touches all important aspects of the real estate transaction. They touch the money, the data, the paperwork, obviously the transfer of ownership, the signing, all the heavy pieces that
the insurance after the sale.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So it's a really important piece. And our perspective is that there will always be a need for that. Even if, people decide to buy houses completely online through one of the iBuyers, that's not really we're not planting a flag in that space, but some people believe that agents will look very different, 10 years from now. But title will definitely exist in some form. And, we're going to be the people to define what that looks like.
Yeah. And so if you could, rather than these kind of vague terms that we've talked about of this changing industry, why don't you tell them what the customer experience, what it is that you see the customer experience being now with you guys, and how you see it maybe, transitioning in the future to being even easier.
Yeah. I think one of the terms that came to mind as you were talking earlier is value creation as opposed to value protection. And so with investors specifically, one of the things that we're really leaning into is working with them to understand what they need in their business overall, and then making sure that title is only helping them in that process. So we're a partner that can really lean in and say every single month, how are you guys doing across your core transaction metrics, and how do you do in comparison to your competitors? And that's really more of the investor side. From the actual, closing experience, our goal is to really meet people where they are and make the process as digital as possible, where, you can self-service everything you need about title online. And if you do need somebody, or you have a seller who needs more of a hand-holding kind of experience, we have, really great people for that. And we can help you with that. But for the people who want to, just get the job done and do it all self-service, we're going to build a product that meets them there.
Well, would you have a ton of hand-holding with, mainly investors know what they're doing. Most investors have already, have a number of transactions under their belt. And then, if it's a retail transaction, most of them would have agents, right? So isn't it an industry where there's not really a ton of that, or is there?
There's a decent amount of it.
We have thousands of transactions under our belt, so it's easy for me to say, but
think about it this way. So, the investor that buys one or hasn't bought yet, if you're listening to this, you want to engage a company like Empora to have your back and to provide you that title insurance. And a lot of the times, the person selling you that property has already engaged a title company that might not be in your best interest, or that doesn't have experience with investors. So as I think that there's a lot of folks out there that don't even know what title insurance is, investors, or who to use or how to use, because every time they've bought, it's kind of provided, or they have a transaction coordinator like we have, if that makes sense. So I have a feeling there's going to be more and more hand-holding as you guys change the game. I think you'll get less and less experienced investors as you guys become the go-to for investors to use for title insurance, because then you'll start picking up a lot of the ones and twosies. And maybe I'm wrong with that. But there's a lot of clients out there that are just, buying one
just
house.
getting started. And,
right.
Megan will talk a little bit about making title insurance easy to understand.
Yeah.
She can do that better than me. But I think when we look at, to your comment on who's going to be coming in, ultimately we want to make it, you have to think about what are the best consumer experiences that we all have, right? Like I always go to Amazon. Amazon's a great one, right? Before it used to go down the street to your bookstore, used to go to the Walmart, or used to go to whatever. And now you can have things delivered. And consumer expectations have changed, right? So it used to be, I'll go to the store. If they have it, I'll buy it. If they don't, no big deal. Then e-commerce came along and kind of changed that, so you could get what you needed. And now our expectations are, why can't this get delivered today? Right? That's we want instantaneous. We want transparency. We want those. Those are the things that are most important to consumers in everything we do, whether it's business or personal. And so when we think about it from what do investors and our customers want, they want the same things, and just happens to be part of their transaction, right? They want to know, I want to send something in. I want title search started immediately. I want to know that it's been started, right? I want to know what the updates are along the way. Are there things for me to do, or tasks, right, that need to be covered? Are there issues that need to be covered? Has money moved, right? Has everybody signed? When are people signing? These are all things that you want to be able, people want self-service and they want it now.
And they want a dashboard with all the information right there.
There. They don't want to talk to anybody. They don't want to pick up the phone, right? And for the instances when they do, we want to make sure that we've created the whole experience so that when that time happens, that our teams are available to bring that final white glove service where needed. But it's really about the 80-20, right? There's 80% of the things that people want updates on that you can just self-serve. And there's 20% of, the investor transactions that are problematic, that have liens, that are, dirty title, dirty issues, need to have a conversation. And so we don't want to take that part out of it. We just want to make it easier for your simple A to Z, right? And then I think from a title standpoint, there's a lot of great title operators out there, right? But that's what people are looking for is like, if you're loyal to a title company, you're loyal to the person that's doing the work because they're great at their job. And so we want to create the experience that puts that in every single transaction, regardless of who the person is working it. And so create the reliability, create the trust, create the consistency. And the only way to do that is with technology. That's the only way you scale.
I worry there might be some people listening that don't really understand how important having a title company with a system in place like what you guys have is, because it took our current title company, it took us 2 years to train them up on our system. And it's not to even train them up. It's to build the system internally, specifically for us and our investor clients.
Yeah.
It doesn't come natural to these title companies. It simply doesn't. We have our own specific team within who we used to use for that. And it took years to get that. Whereas you guys are right out of the box. You have the digital setup that is what took forever for us to make happen. And the idea of even mobile notaries was mind blowing, to them when we first established that.
What are you talking about? We had title company last year on a giant real estate transaction that it was
$3 million.
Yeah, like
$3 million.
No way of doing a mobile closing.
Our client is in California. We're selling him $3 million apartment building. And the day before closing, the title company says, well, what time will he be in our office? And he's in California. Well, we can't close then. When is he flying in? Like it's mine. That's the part that people might not understand how important this topic is and how important what you guys are doing is for an investor, to get in with a company like Empora Title that can serve their needs, because a lot of clients are buying in multiple markets. All the smart money is being diversified across the nation, and they need a title company rather than a mom and pop shop in each town. Yeah,
I'd like to talk about the process a little bit, because Amazon's kind of the benchmark for everyone's discussion on instantaneous. It was 9 p.m. the other night, and I realized I wanted to work out the next morning, and my headphones were broke. I got on Amazon at 9 p.m. Headphones there at 4 a.m. I could check where it was at all the way, to my front door. So I'm glad you brought that up, because, it's what we all use. So if you could just walk us through the process, I think it would help a lot of our listeners out.
Sure. So if you're an investor and you've, gotten into contract with the seller, you can upload it into our site. And now we actually have a scanner that pulls the relevant data off of your contract and puts it directly into our system to start the title work. So you start the transaction, you make sure everything looks right, seller name, all that. Normally the stuff that investors are sending over email to title companies, it just goes directly into our site, so it can't get lost in somebody's inbox.
So it doesn't matter what purchase agreement form is, you're able to just, because you're probably seeing, I can't imagine how many different purchase agreements.
Oh, so many.
Yeah.
They're all different.
Yeah.
All different.
Right.
Wow.
Okay.
They're all different.
You scan that in.
Yep.
Right.
So that kicks off the process. And then if you have to submit earnest money, we actually use the same technology that you guys might have seen with like a Venmo or PayPal to actually send the earnest money into our system. So you can do that directly out of our site. And investors love that, especially the wholesalers, because we notify them when their end buyers have actually submitted.
Right.
So that's kind of the second step. And then once we've done the title work, that's when people get more involved in the dashboard, like you've seen, where we'll tell you, exactly where we are in the title process. And once we get all the title work back, we'll summarize it for investors and tell them what needs to happen to clear the issues and how long it's going to take for each of them. So they can, start tracking towards their closing date. And then once we get closer to closing, then our people reach out, for the lender information or however they're financing, get that all buttoned up. And, like I said before, we try to close digitally whenever we can, and we have somebody who wants to. We hear crazy stories. We love it when people tell us about where all they've closed with us. Like people have closed on their phone and moving cars. We've had people close on private jets. Doesn't really matter where, like as long as you have a connection, you can use our system to do it. And then they'll sign their documents, and that's pretty much it.
All right. It's very interesting. But you use traditional insurance. So you have underwriters like who? First American,
I believe. And WFG.
Okay. So as far as claims go, you're insured by the same big companies. You've just streamlined that process. This must have been a mountain to set this company up. That's the part that really blows my mind. And I don't know that this will resonate as much with our listeners, but the idea that you guys could change an entire industry and come in and all of the behind the scenes stuff that is so difficult, title searches. I mean, you know, any day you go down to your local courthouse, there's title searchers in there. How did you coordinate this across the country?
Through a great team
Yeah.
is the short answer to that. Our team, I mean, we have some amazing people on our team who have processed title work for, you know, some of the biggest names in the industry across the nation. And we really couldn't do it without them, because title is no different, where a lot of the knowledge is in, you got to hire the best industry experts to get the job done and do what we're doing. But, you know, honestly, a lot of trial and error in the very beginning. But we partnered with First American and WFG because, you know, there's a lot of good coverage there, right? Where it's like we can plug into their best resources, and the coverage is going to be as good with them as anybody else. So they've been a good help to us.
Well, I want people to understand why title insurance is so important. And so I'm going to tell just a really brief story of our most recent title claim. So we purchased a property, and the signer, we believed that they had the power to transfer the property, and they did. However, the mother had passed away and the will had been changed. And so it became this entire thing where the whole family wanted paid out. And keep in mind, we bought this property for nothing. Say we paid $100,000 for it, and we put $50,000 of rehab into it, and we're getting ready to sell it. And that's when this came about. Okay, so it can be very complicated. And then the lady that we bought it from and signed was sued for fraud by the other people, and that somehow tied this property up as well, right? And then our client was scared, didn't want to buy it, so we lost our sale. And we called our title company and said, what in the heck is going on? We've got all this money out there. And we signed title back over and got a giant check, right?
Correct.
Okay. So that's a reason why people have title insurance, and who you work with matters. Having good title insurance and having a company that stands behind it that you can touch base with, that's about the only time you need to call a title company. But there are probably some nightmare stories that you guys have seen in the industry that, like what I just said, doesn't even scratch the surface.
Yeah, we see it all the time, whether it's on the deals that we process for people, or there's a break in the chain from some other transaction that we got to help. And to be honest, being investor focused from day one has really set us up to help people through that, where some title companies might see an investor transaction and it's like, okay, they hear that story and that's a lot of work to unwind. And they, instead of, you know, going towards the problem, they, go the other direction. So, we hear about those kinds of stories all the time, and a great title company or just a great title relationship can make or break, a new investor's business, especially when they're trying to go from one transaction a year to 10 to, 50. If you don't have a good title partner for that, like it's done, right? Because you need somebody who's going to care about getting your deal done as much as you do.
Right.
And so that's really the brand that, and the partnership that we try to bring to the table.
So you work with folks, everything from small investors who would buy one house every 4 years, say, or 5 years, to pretty big investors who are doing a lot of volume. And is their dashboard the same? Is the process the same no matter what for any of these clients?
Yeah, for the most part. Obviously as the teams get bigger, people have different ways they like their TC done. If you're, just starting out and there's a one person show doing all of it versus somebody who has a dedicated TC, it's a little bit different. But at the end of the day, everybody wants it to be easy and they want it to be as transparent as possible. But they also want it to be as hands off as they'd like it to be. So it's pretty similar all the way up. And that's one of the things that we really like about this business is that it's not, a completely different product for, different investors and sizes. So it's been a lot of fun, and no two transactions are the same. I will say that.
Well, I've found that some of the most important parts of being a real estate investor are kind of what are thought of as maybe the boring parts, or the parts that people don't think about. Home insurance, people don't think about that, and the costs and as an investor, what you do need covered and what you don't, and getting that sweet spot. Title insurance, the process of purchasing. And, you know, for a lot of our clients, they don't know much about the title company because we have a transaction coordinator who does it all for them. It makes our life easier working with Empora, but for a lot of the smaller investors, they might not understand how important this title process is too.
Yep.
Because it's not something that we all talk about. We don't sit around and talk about title insurance. Oh, who do you use for title insurance? But it's so important, and it can make or break deals. You know, if a title company doesn't get things done in the right amount of time, financing can fall apart. There's all kinds of issues that can arise if you're not working with the right title company.
I think it's overlooked a lot too, because Scotty and I have been on speaking circuits, across the country, and how often do we see a title insurance rep?
We talked about that at the last one. There's never any title reps up there talking about this aspect of real estate, and it's incredibly important. And the truth is, a lot of people don't understand title insurance. They don't understand the title commitment. They don't understand, they don't understand the whole process, or even what it insures and what it doesn't insure. Could you speak to, when someone gets a title policy, what does it cover?
Yep. Yeah. So in its simplest form, when you work with a title company and we do a title search, our job is to find any encumbrances that are in public record. So, that situation with the family where somebody had passed away, any mortgages or liens of record, if somebody has back taxes due, anything that the government recognizes as tied to the person or the property, that's essentially what title insurance covers. So reading those commitments, we do our best to put it in our site, make it really easy to understand. But if you're not working with an investor-focused title company, you should definitely read your commitments for what they are insuring and what they aren't. For example, I've seen title companies, not in Ohio, that are more focused on the retail side, not cover a water and sewer, even though it follows the property, because it's kind of a pain to go get. But if you're buying a property from, somebody who had a tenant and they weren't paying the bills, then you're going to get stuck with that. Or things like, surveys, right? We actually had somebody buy a house cash, and they didn't get a survey because the title company had it as a survey exception on their commitment, and they didn't have a lender, so they didn't require it. And then when that person went to go sell the property, they flipped it, sold it to an FHA buyer who couldn't buy it because they had an encroachment on the property. It was somebody's garage that was like 20 feet across the boundary line. And so they had to figure out, after they had already done the rehab, how they were going to unwind this, because they essentially couldn't sell to any on-market buyers. So that's like the not cool, like not sexy part that people,
but it happens. I mean, I can name 5 different issues that have come up like this. One of them was a driveway that we had out in the country, where we had to rebuild a driveway because of an easement, and it was over a ditch. So it took like 6 months to get approval from the city to be able to put a driveway over a culvert, and title insurance saved our butts on that.
And I think Megan brought up a good point, being investor focused. Scotty and I talk about it on the show all the time. People think that every realtor is the same, every lender is the same. You have to be in with someone that knows the investment process. I mean, there's 98% of realtors have no business representing investors whatsoever. If you're trying to build a rental portfolio, don't walk into a large brick and mortar bank. It's the same with title insurance. It's different. Retail versus investment is exceptionally different. You got to pick the right team that has that investor focus.
And that's a really important. I mean, you hear for any of the newer investors out there looking to do their first deal or their first 10 deals, you hear and talk to a lot of people about how do you market, right? How do you find and acquire? Like, what's your acquisition strategy? What's your dispo strategy? But they don't talk about the partnership of how are you transacting these properties? And if you have you need to have a partner that knows what they're doing. That's also going to be there to own mistakes too. Like, there's like part of the reason title is a problem in this industry is the lack of access to information makes it problematic. And so, it has a very low claim rate when you need it. but when you need it, you need it. And that's the biggest part. I mean, what's title insurance claim rate? Like 4%, 3 to 4%.
Oh, I'm surprised it's even that high.
Yeah. But, and that's for, from a volume standpoint in dollars, it's huge though. Right. So we have a lot of investors that close 100, 200 deals a year, and maybe they only have to, there'll be they'll use it one time or two times per 100. But when they need it, there's big dollars associated.
Big dollars. And you could be in a cash position where you can't afford that at that time. And so having the right title insurance and making sure, like you guys have said, that you understand what exceptions there are and knowing those details. And that's why working with a partner like Empora is so important for investors. And Clint, you're so right. I mean, it matters what bank you use. You can't just go to any random, lender to get your investment property loan. You can't just call your local agent, your insurance agent, to get insurance. Maybe you can, maybe you'll get lucky, but there's people who specialize in each step of this process. And if you want to make investing miserable, what you do is you go to a brick and mortar bank, a brick and mortar brokerage, and a brick and mortar title company, and you want to see how miserable real estate investing can be. That's what you do. But if you do it right and you find a group of people that specialize in investment properties like the Homeboys or, any other local market specialists like us, and you find title companies that have literally built their entire companies around digitizing, moving this forward for investors, it will make your life so much easier. It's true. It will just make investing actually work instead of being a headache.
And that's really, we think about like the power that you're talking about with the Homeboys and the community. Like, the power of community is really important. So for us, like, we want to make sure that we're connecting with our partners to figure out what are they trying to build? Like, who do they need to be connected to? Who are the right lenders? Who are the right brokers? Who are looking for bridge loans versus looking for DSCR loans, right? And make sure that we're bringing in, like, powering that community, because that's a lot of the value that people we work with get, right? It's one is having like a performance partner that knows investor title. And that's important because investor business is more complicated. Not always, right? But usually there's oftentimes distressed sellers involved. There's oftentimes, money that's owed, right? So there's some claims or
there's
liens
unusual
out there.
Lending, like you just mentioned.
There's unusual creative lending, right? There's all these things that if you're working with someone that doesn't understand that, you're not setting yourself up to be protected, one, and to also have a performance partner that's going to look out for you.
Oh, no. On the closing day, they're going to call you and say, what time's your flight coming in to close?
Right. I mean, there's nothing people hate more than being inconvenienced, right? So let's just call it what it is. Like, we are in the business of being a strong performance partner and creating convenience in every aspect possible in buying and selling real estate. And that's what people want, right? Yeah. People want convenience, and convenience can mean a lot of things, but ultimately it means I don't need to go somewhere to get something done. I don't need to talk to somebody to find out information, right? I just want it at my fingertips, and I want it seamlessly.
It's been neat to watch, you guys change the industry to a more, my kids don't like picking up the telephone. They hate it. They'd rather text. They'd rather get on their computer, see the dashboard, have an app. And to see the way that you guys have changed title insurance to where you guys are cutting edge here, where that's becoming the norm because of what you guys are building. And I know that the bigger shops are way behind on that, which is, it's mind blowing to me that they're not leading that way with the billions of dollars they have. But you were saying before, when we were talking before the show, that it's never the old industry that's the cutting edge ones. It's the young, fresh blood. It's not Barnes and Nobles and Borders that created Amazon online. No, it's the new fresh blood that comes in and creates it. And it's cool to watch from our perspective.
It's fun
to see it happen.
It's fun, and it's can be capital intensive, right, in the early days. But at the end of the day, it's who has nothing to lose, right? And that's who changes all these industries, right? Yeah. It was the taxi companies we talked about, right? I mean, they didn't start Uber or Lyft. Someone else with nothing to lose did. Who started Airbnb or VRBO or those? It wasn't the Marriotts and Hiltons. It was the founder and the founding team and the first 50, 100, 200 employees that had a vision, believed in the vision, worked tirelessly every day, and had nothing to lose. Right? Because the worst thing is when you start companies, I mean, you have 1 in 6 million companies typically that actually succeed and have a meaningful exit. It's a pretty odds are stacked against you.
Right.
But people that are doing this are passionate about being part of the change they want to see in the world, in an industry, in a problem, in something. And so those are individuals that we have 50 of them at our company that are amazing, and they show up every day excited to try to change something with nothing to lose.
Yeah.
And I think those people with nothing to lose are the most dangerous people in society, right? In a positive way.
Yeah. For sure.
There's old Bob Dylan line, when you ain't got nothing, you ain't got nothing to lose.
That's right.
It's kind of that's how Scott and I both got into real estate individually. It's like, you dive all in. It was just a much different time. Like listen to the technology aspect of this. I'm just a sponge. I just want to sit here and listen and learn, because my brain doesn't. He still rents his movies from Blockbuster.
Yeah.
It's like it just blows my mind.
I drive all the way to Seattle to that last Blockbuster every evening.
Awesome.
No, but you guys have, when you first came along, let me just be real honest. We've seen the first people in industries to come along, try to change things, and to not do well. But when about a year ago, I think is when we first started talking with Empora Title, and the people were really dynamic that you set us up with, that we were talking to. They were really interesting folks. But then to see this execution that we've been able to watch over the last year, you've been able to pull it off. And if you would have asked me a year ago when we first started talking, would you be able to? I thought that is a big thing to try to take on these giant industries. And you guys you've established yourselves now. So this isn't like a title company that, you're hoping works. You've built it now. Now it's about growing it, right? You're established. You're there. You guys are doing it. So now what?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We were talking about this on the way. Empora has been around for going on 4 years, which is crazy to think about. But even now, it still feels like the beginning. And I know that's so cliche to say, but we have so much work to do. We have so much product to build, so many markets to still go into, and we really hired, some really great people last year. So I'm excited to, continue to gel the team and see everything they can create. So yeah, it's a big, hairy problem, and it certainly has its, painful days and ups and downs, just like any business. But it's been really motivating to see our team rally behind this and keep going.
Are you nationwide now?
We're licensed in 35 states.
Okay.
We're focused really on a couple. We've processed title work in about 7.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Yeah, and growing.
Yeah.
One of the things for our team that's really important is, like, we talk about how important it is, like, just be 1% better every day, right? We're going to make mistakes. We're just like a new investor or an experienced investor. There's things that you come up with and you've done them, 100 times, 200 times, and you're still going to make mistakes. And so, our commitment is always to, like, being better than yesterday. And we want to own our problems.
I thought he made a mistake once, but it turns out I was wrong.
No, yeah.
Scott's made
Maybe it's just Scott. Maybe Scott's the problem. Scott's the problem. Might have to talk to HR after this.
That's right.
But that's really important. Like, we're somebody that is, as a team, we want to embody that and say, we're going to be a partner with you that's going to own our mistakes. And that's what when we talk about brand and what we want to be known for, we want to be known for being dynamic, for changing an industry, but we also want to be known for being trustworthy and owning mistakes. And I think that's really, really important in how you build teams and high performance teams, and something that, we're committed to as a business. And, if you guys have grown yourselves, right, bringing in great people, giving them the opportunities that they should be afforded, and seeing how they can fly, and managing and coaching through that, performance and evolution is a really important aspect.
It's the only thing that matters.
It's everything.
It's the only thing that matters. I keep going back in my head to how important this topic is, and wanting to get that across to our listeners so that they truly understand what a nightmare title on a property can be, and title, if you're working with somebody who doesn't have investor experience, can be, and how important it is for our listeners when they're doing your first deal to, if you're growing right now, to make a switch to a company like Empora that has the dashboards to make your life easy. It almost eliminates an employee for a group like ours. I mean, it nearly eliminates a transaction coordinator. Very nearly. An entire position at a company like ours.
Yeah, we've seen some of our partners repurpose that role to sales. Like we've literally had some of our early partners say we have eliminated a TC headcount and added a sales headcount, which that is just like music to my ears because that's more deals, more, more of you hitting your goals. So, we try to be that partner for everybody we work with. And to your point about just the overall importance in the transaction, title nightmares are not ones that you want to be figuring out on your own. I mean, because you won't be able to, right? It'll be you having to go, learn a bunch of stuff, and it sucks. So, a great title company and in reverse, a not great title company can make or break your seller relationship, can make or break your actual closing timeline when you're coordinating a bunch of different parties. If you send an operating agreement to a retail title company that isn't buttoned up, they might just ignore it in their email and come back to it 5 days later because it was a mess. Yeah. So, it can really just put your whole business on hold if you don't have a good relationship.
When time kills deals in this business, right? Literally, I mean, we have people that die mid-transaction, or a spouse that dies mid-transaction or something. I mean, it happens all the time. Right. And you're like, if this could have gotten done 5 days faster, it would have been after.
Then that dead person would have owned a home.
And so that's just, I think that's important, right? We look at the speed as being really important. So when we think about submitting a deal, historically it goes, you send it via email. Now you can do it right in a system that when that comes in, title search starts within 45 minutes. Right. And so you just eliminate like more and more elimination
45
of gaps.
minutes. I think that's really important to stress. I mean, people aren't used to that. I mean, it hits historically it'll hit somebody's email inbox and sit there for, 24 hours to 72 hours, depending
or a
on
week. And then they have to rush because they realize that they overlooked an email.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's human error, right?
Yeah, and then how do you check to see if they've even started your title search? You got to pick up the phone and call the brick and mortar title company and say, "Hey, where are we with this?"
Yeah,
I don't know. Let me look.
Let me put you through to this person.
Yeah,
voicemail. That's amazing. I think that's a huge advertising piece for you guys. How quickly it gets started.
I mean, we've had, remarkable. Those are the things like speed is important, transparency is important. We talked about that, but last year alone, we closed over $250 million worth of investor transaction business, right? For over 400 different investors that actually submitted deals to us. Mm-hmm. And so, we want to build that reputation of being on it, being fast, being consistent, being reliable. I mean, that's the brand, right? That is that's what people want. So that's what we're committed to doing. And for anybody out there too that, are the A players in title, like we always are recruiting the best. Like we want to recruit the best people in this business, barring none, right? That's what we want people to say about us. We've got the best team, we've got the best technology, and we have the best experience. Those are three really important things. And that's what's going to lead to us being successful as an industry, becoming an industry leader.
So for those listening that may not do just typical residential deals, what about folks who develop? Like Clint and I will build neighborhoods, and that title work from the beginning can be pretty complicated all the way to the end transaction when we sell it off. Or we've got clients who just sold a FedEx facility. Do you do commercial title insurance as well, or is it strictly investment, basically residential?
Yeah, I'd say majority of our customer base today is mostly residential, up to 10 unit buildings. But we have started to take more and more commercial as it's come to us opportunistically. Okay. So it's another arm of the business that's like maturing and building out, but we are closing commercial business as well.
Because I would assume as your clients grow and they're like, okay, well, I'm not going anywhere but Empora. Mm-hmm. You're going to end up needing to do their bigger projects and their bigger sales too, right? Yep. So you have that ability baked in.
And I think that's a lot of the natural progression in this industry as an investor, right? You were talking, I think it was one of the first home that you guys built when you were showing me the first video. I have my partner, John, and I, the first duplex we bought was in Grandview in Columbus, and we had nothing to lose, right? I mean, literally, we knew absolutely nothing.
We get it.
And we went in we went in with sledgehammers and mass, and there was asbestos that we didn't even know existed. And
been there.
I mean, that was like the first and last time we ever touched a power tool in a renovation.
Not for us.
Not our thing, but
did you have a beer in the left hand and the power tool in the right? That might have been the problem.
Yeah, beer in both hands. We pounded our head on the wall after we hit an electrical wire.
My pay lines aren't straight for some reason.
Yeah, what happened? It must have been the 12 Coronas I had at midnight last night trying to do this. But those are, the natural progression for investors is you get in and you got to take the plunge. So if people are listening and, you can get into this paralysis analysis at some point, if it thing pencils, go after it, right? Because you just got to dive in. Right. But the progression is you do some single families, you get to duplexes, and then you kind of get to a level of scale. We have investors that close 100, 200, 300 deals in that business, and that's what they're good at, and they love it, and they're experts at it, and that's what the lane they want to stay in. But I think a lot of the progression goes into commercial and multifamily, just the things with more commas and more zeros over time. And so that's what we would continue to expect our customer base to mature into and, need to be able to serve them.
Well, I think I speak for Scotty and I both. It's really been a privilege to watch you guys grow, and we're excited to see where you're going with Empora Title. We talk about it all the time. We like being around successful people, and we like being around people that inspire us. And you guys both have definitely done that today. I could sit here and we could talk forever, but I think we are getting to the end of our time. Been awesome, hasn't it?
It's been really neat. I've struggled to not just want to ask them a million questions about how you take on a $36 billion industry, but at its core, what they've built is a title company that any of our listeners that are investors should really use, because they make it as digitally friendly and easy as anyone, and they back it up with the right team, and then you're insured with the big insurance companies, and it's a great resource. They've built a really streamlined system that makes it accessible for anyone and easy for investors to use.
So we got to know, how do people get in contact with Empora Title? What's the best way to get started?
Well, big plus to what Braden said before. If you know of anybody in title, or you're listening and you're in title and you work with investors, go to emporatitle.com and go to our careers page. We pay well, and we want to reward the best people in the market. So don't hesitate to do that. But in terms of if you're an investor, you can do it one of two ways. You can send Braden an email, braden@emporatitle.com, or you can go directly to our site, and you can actually just get started at emporatitle.com. You can log into our site and submit a contract. So you can talk to us if you need to, or you can just get started online.
EmporaTitle.com.
EmporaTitle.com. It's so easy.
That's right. Well, we're going to be your biggest cheerleaders. We really appreciate your time, Megan and Braden. Thank you for coming on. It's been truly a privilege.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Well, that's our show. We appreciate you guys tuning in to the Homeboys podcast. Keep tuning in for future podcasts. Make sure you check out Empora Title. Very cutting edge, very important to have the right title partner, and they're doing big things at Empora Title. For other content from the Homeboys, please check out @the Homeboys podcast on TikTok. You can also find us on YouTube and Instagram. Until next time, homies, happy investing.